Let's say you are assigned a 1,000 person factory. Give me a 90 days roadmap on how you are going to do all of these things.
Well, I'd like to think any type of industrial plant like a factory would already have processes in, right? And they would already have that in. I think the first thing is...
Meet Shan Saber, a veteran recruitment industry leader turned EMCC Level 5 professional coach. He is also the founder of an anti-trafficking movement and director at Brightwork Staffline, one of the largest recruitment agency in Scotland.
Can you give me the spot design checklist you will give to a new shift manager?
If you see somebody, for example, in an industrial environment, right?
This modern day slavery, can you paint a picture for me? How does it really work?
I can give you some examples, really. So we have, I think it was around 20,000 people in the UK.
Where do profit incentives in high volume recruitment conflict with workers' welfare? And how do you resolve tensions potentially?
I suppose in different areas of recruitment it can be very difficult. I think the first thing about working in recruitment is it's important because recruitment businesses tend to be enablers, right? They tend to be the people who can help people into the type of work that they want to get into, the type of company that they want to get into.
So when we hear Brightwork and Scotland against modern slavery, what's the simplest way to explain the problem you are trying to solve?
Well, there's two things in there. Most importantly, Brightwork is recruitment, right? It's a recruitment business that I work for. And the importance of actually enabling people into work is part of what we do as a business. Scotland Against Modern Slavery came through that because the risks of labour exploitation in society are huge.
Really?
I had no idea, a number of years ago, the size and the scale of the problem here in Scotland and the UK and globally. And that frustration made me get involved. I had to do something about it, and that's where I was able to found Scotland Against Modern Slavery.
Wow. Can you give me a time when you experienced this and what made you decide to turn this into something you are going to be actively pursuing?
Brilliant question, because I think that so at work, at Brightwork, a number of years ago, we have a number of sectors that we recruit into. One of those sectors was the whiskey industry, the drinks industry, or it is, sorry, but back then we weren't involved in food manufacturing, for example. And the simplest thing for us to do was to expand the business, was to move into that sector. But as part of that, me and another colleague had to go and become go to a course about understanding the risks of labour exploitation, and particularly in the food industry. So just as a tick box exercise, this was about making money and growing the business. So a tick box exercise, I went and did the course with a colleague, and I felt sick at the end of that course. It was a full day course. It was called Stronger Together, and it was way back in 2017 or 18. And I felt at that point I had to do something about it. I couldn't sleep that night, so that's where it all started.
Wow. So recruitment is often seen as a race to the bottom. What's the single biggest misconception about recruitment in the United Kingdom right now?
Wow. I think recruitment, yes, it is seen as a race to the bottom. I think it has been in a race to the bottom for a long, long time. The misconception is, or I think maybe recruitment, as in recruitment agencies, sometimes have done themselves a disservice generally, because good recruitment is people focused. Good recruitment is understanding the needs of the customer and the candidate and actually how that works. But what happens in a race to the bottom is it becomes very, very transactional. But we're not trading in commodities. We're not trading in a general service. This is people. This is people's jobs, and the job is such a big part of your life. So I suppose the misconception is that it's just money and pound signs. Good recruiters, people that are good at their jobs, really take into deep consideration the needs of the customer, the business or the organisation, and the needs of the individual, and find that match and challenge some misconceptions on both parties and both sides. Not good recruitment or bad recruitment is where it becomes purely transactional, and that can be very, very difficult.
Wow. That could be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would be true for modern day slavery to reduce or become zero in, let's say, Scotland and the United Kingdom in the next 5 years?
5 years?
Yeah.
To do that, I don't think it will happen, if I'm being honest with you, because the scale of the issue. in the scale of concern. If I give you some statistics,
Please.
in Scotland, there's a system of when somebody is referred as a victim of trafficking. So this could be sexual exploitation or labour exploitation. And when they are referred by a first responder, so it could be police, paramedics, somebody who's trained in that area, some of the charities as well, they enter what's called the national referral mechanism. So that's where the statistics come from. In Scotland last year was nearly 1,000 people. So effectively 1,000 people. That's the highest since records began, and that was about 10, 15 years ago, if I get my facts right. So as we go into the end of 24, there was nearly 1,000 people rescued. That's big numbers, and it's increased every year. The issue that to try and eradicate it is it's about awareness, so public awareness. I think we as members of the public are much more aware of spotting the signs and understanding of knowing what it is. But if I touch on skills and shortages and those types of things where there's difficulties in labour exploitation, for example, what you do then see is where there's a need for labour, you'll see an increase in exploitation. It's never done by a business purposefully, but it's the criminality behind that make it much more common.
Wow. So how, if I give you a magic wand right now with your experience, 15 years experience working in this sector, how will you stop it?
Oh, stopping modern slavery. Well, I don't know how we could go about it. In Scotland, first of all, raising awareness, understanding labour shortages and skill shortages do have a part to play in all of this. But immigration control has a big part to play in this as well. So where we came, if I'm, without being overly political, but where we came from with Brexit, and when Brexit came into play, we found that many, many thousands of those of Eastern European origin left the UK. There's no doubt about that. They left and went to wherever they were going, their home nations or other countries around the world. And what we found is, as we came through COVID, with Brexit at the exact same time being implemented, we had skills shortages that we hadn't seen in over 10, 15 years. And those skills shortages tended to be in where there was a lower skill level. So, for example, agriculture, food manufacturing, care, health and social care. And that's where we've seen an increase attempted. Now, some sectors are very, very well regulated, and there's great processes in place to make sure that it doesn't happen. But we saw an increase in the care sector, and that was purely down to the change in immigration. So what happened is that back then, 2021, 22, if I get my dates right, the UK government added care worker to the shortage occupation list, right?
Yeah.
And when you add that to the shortage occupation list, you allow people to come from all over the globe to come to the UK and work as long as they fit the criteria to become a care worker. Generally a low-skilled role and not a great paid role. So what we then found is the increase of exploitation in the care sector, or for care workers, went up. Not knowingly, there were some bad businesses, some, a minority, not knowingly, because what was happening is we were finding that people were coming and finding themselves tied to a certain employer and they couldn't find another job. So if something... And the instances of that were much, much higher than previous years, purely down to immigration. So we have very strict immigration control in the UK, rightly or wrongly, and that can create an environment where, for example, in labour exploitation anyway, that we create the need for it. So to me, where we see the shortages and where we see those needs in labour, that could, if immigration was a little bit more open, a little bit less restricted, and I'm not saying anything other than in the attempt to try and reduce the attempt of exploitation in labour and the workforce, that's really, really important.
This modern day slavery, can you paint a picture for me? How does it really work?
So I can give you some examples, really. So we have, I think it was around 20,000 people in the UK were referred through the National Referral Mechanism last year. But statistically, there's an estimated 130,000 people kept in different shapes or forms of exploitation. Sexual exploitation, labour exploitation, debt bondage, I can talk through the different areas of it. That's estimated 130,000 people. That's big numbers. Globally, the estimate, including child marriage and forced marriage, is just short of 50 million. So that is... near enough close to, well, it depends how you look at it, the population of the UK held in some shape of slavery across globally. So that's the scale of the problem. What it actually looks like can vary. Very, very simple examples that I can give. of people that we've seen or supported is that in somebody who's come, for example, I'll give you a really broad example without any name, somebody who came from a European country a number of years ago, a young man, to come and work in the UK and see the UK. So young, wants to explore and see the world. He came and he worked in the security industry in London. His boss didn't pay him for a number of weeks. He wasn't able to stay in his accommodation because his rent, he wasn't paying his rent. And his boss, he went to his boss and said, "Can you please pay me? I need to pay my landlord." And the boss said, "Well, I've got a farm area in Scotland. Come up. I know you'll have animals. We can look after animals there. It's dogs that I look after." And he came up. It wasn't a dog kennel. It was a puppy farm. It's quite well publicised. A puppy farm is in breeding dogs and selling the dogs, and it was illegal. It wasn't registered business or anything like that. So it wasn't a proper business. And this individual was held captive for nearly a year, sleeping in a room where the dogs had been sleeping, cleaning up, helping the dogs breed and give birth. Had to beg his boss for food, for money, and those types of things. Kept really captive for a year. And that's a real simple example. This person was exploited because I think he was vulnerable, and his vulnerability was his love for animals, and he's suspected he has autism, and he's on the spectrum, and this is something that was exploited. Now this scenario is just one, right, and this is one that's went to court, but that's one of the stories that I've met. There's many others, and when it comes to, for example, in the workplace, and historically, labour exploitation, we would talk about nail bars and car washes, and what we see there is people who generally don't have the right to work that are working in those environments. What I mean is where there's exploitation historically, and what we learn is to spot the signs of something that isn't right is that if your car's getting washed and it's far too cheap, and the people that are working in the car wash aren't wearing the correct PPE, there's something not right about it. And it doesn't mean all car washes are exploitative at all. It just means that's the signs, and this is historic, because a lot of this has changed now through regulation. Nail bars, not that I've had my nails done for a long time, but nail bars can, if you have your nails done and it's done very, very cheaply, why? And so there's been a lot of education about that through a number of sources over the years that people go to recognise the signs. What we used to see in labour exploitation, and it takes it back to recruitment. If I go back to a little bit more corporate and how that works, we would have seen and what I mean is not so much in the employer that I'm with just now. What I mean is spotting the signs of labour exploitation was very important. In a recruitment agency, if they are providing temporary workers in an industrial type environment, and somebody brought in 4 or 5 people and said, can you register these workers, please? They're all my cousins. And this one person spoke and translated for those 4 or 5 people. This one person held their bank details. This one person held their passports or work permits. This one person did all the talking. That's not right. Now, what would show from the past, a recruitment agency would be a weak point of entry, because if you can get them registered in the agency, where they end up going to work, if the signs aren't spotted at the agency, they're not spotting the signs of work, what could happen is that gangmaster, that one person, would be taking all their money, would be controlling their shifts because they're controlling their phone, would be making sure they don't see their pay slips because they have all their email addresses, going to the one person. That's kind of historic, and these signs are very well publicised, particularly in sectors that are really well regulated. So when I talk about, for example, food manufacturing, it's very highly regulated, and recruitment agencies working in that sector and the businesses working in that sector, they are very well trained and very well versed in spotting these signs. So that makes it very, very difficult for a gangmaster to penetrate into a business that supplies into those areas. But then other sectors won't be as knowledgeable. So going back to the answer, is the best way to stop it is through knowledge and crossing those boundaries. So within Scotland Against Modern Slavery, we bring business sectors right across Scotland together. We get those in food manufacturing and been on this journey to tell other sectors, construction, care, general manufacturing, public transport, all these other different sectors where they're intertransferable, if that makes sense. So then awareness, and it's not just awareness as a business, it's human rights. as humans, we have to make sure we look after our fellow humans, and that probably comes. I'm pointing to my heart here, but that's where it comes from, right? That's how we should do it, and that's how we should change it.
Oh. Somebody once told me one time ago, it's a claim that I didn't find any reason to pursue, that Scotland also has history in slavery, and do you think it has anything to do with the modern day slavery we are talking about?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do with regards to talking about modern slavery is address the connection with transatlantic slavery and historic slavery, because Scotland, Glasgow, Edinburgh, the major cities, the connection is so obvious, right? I grew up in this city not really ever understanding the connection with historic transatlantic slavery. And you don't have to look too far. Now, in modern day Glasgow, we're starting to acknowledge it, right? Modern day Edinburgh, we're starting to acknowledge it. Dundee as well. The universities have all are starting to acknowledge it. Glasgow University, have accepted that the new building, and when they say the new building, when it was built with benefactors who had made their millions, literally millions, through the trade of tobacco and sugar from the West Indies and the Southern American states. So, Virginia Street, Jamaica Street, the Merchant City, all of these things, the Gallery of Modern Art, this was literally what would be somebody had the equivalent wealth of David Beckham, who'd made his money trading on tobacco that was picked on the backs by the hands and on the backs of those that were shipped from Africa and held in slavery. So we have to accept that and we have to address it. And the reminders of our connection as a city, if I'm going really specific to Glasgow, we can never get away from. And it's not just in the city centre, it's all over the place. It's stately homes, it's family, intergenerational family wealth, the repatriations that all finished paying to those that had shares in slavery. I think it's around 2015 that's when we finished, and slavery was abolished in 1808. So the legacy is always going to be with us, and it's in the DNA of the country, the city. Accept it. Now, my personal opinion is we don't change any names, we accept it, we change that, we don't change it. But the connection to modern slavery is we think that's when it finished. That was it, over. Slavery doesn't exist anymore. That was my understanding as well. No. So back then, in those days, those in Glasgow, those in Scotland, they nodded or acknowledged that slavery existed, but they didn't accept it, if that makes sense, right? Way back then. Where did the wealth come from? The city was extremely wealthy. The second city of the British Empire, it was known as, right? Never mind the wealth of Edinburgh that was created through through shareholding in slavery, the commerce behind it. So we have to accept it, and we have to accept how brutal it was, how it ripped apart society and the fabrics and created generational trauma that still lives with us today. But when we accept that now, we talk about it openly, but we have to understand it's still happening now. And those numbers globally said, touching on 50 million, that is significant. So accepting that slavery still exists globally, locally, because people always say it doesn't happen here, it doesn't happen in Glasgow. Yes, it does. It doesn't happen in Scotland. Yes, it does. Accepting it happens is the first part to then dealing with it and processing that. And then how do we change?
Oh my goodness! This is a lot. You've been working with Brightwork for about 17 years.
Yeah.
What kept you in the industry? Through COVID, after COVID, the recession, pandemic, labor shocks. What has kept you going?
It's first of all, I work with a great bunch of people, right, and that is really, really important. I've always felt that you spend so much time in work that you have to enjoy what you do. But importantly for me is, like, for example, at Brightwork, is the values, right? Your own value, what's inside here, what drives me is the importance of doing the right thing. And I get to work for a business where we've talked about Scotland Against Modern Slavery. I'm involved in some other things as well. And I think being able to do the right thing and yet help grow a business, because in recruitment, I think reputational recruitment businesses sometimes are tarred wrongly, but they don't do the right thing, but we're able to go above and beyond and do the right thing. So when you talk about the toughness of the market, and the market is tough, the economy is really tough at the moment, and it has been for a long time. COVID was really tough. as you mentioned, there's a financial crash in 2008 that we're still feeling the ramifications from Brexit. Had such a big impact on the economy, and like a slow puncture actually, as we still go through it. And I think that working with good people, where people have shared, a good business that shares good values, and of course sometimes things can be up and down, very highly pressured in the sector that I'm in as well, and anyone from recruitment I'm sure will share that with me, but it means that when at the core of, when I touch my heart again about values, because it is so important to me, that belief in doing the right thing and making a difference, if I can do that with a business like Brightwork, then I know I'm in the right place.
Wow, that's really nice. I think you are extremely, not lucky, but you must have. I don't know the right words to use. Not many people are able to describe where they work the way you.
Yeah.
I can't say you are lucky. That would mean you've not done anything. You are just lucky. So I actually lack the words for this. So what's one belief you had, let's say a decade ago or 17 years ago, that you've had to abandon after doing all of these things about recruitment?
Oh, about recruitment. What did I believe? Oh, probably I thought I could be rich. Right? Simple, yeah. Long time ago. Money's never been a huge motivator for me, right? But if, going back to all those years ago, if the economy stayed on track, which it never actually does, right? Life would be very different, right? And there's an acceptance over those years that you have, it's not, and that's me getting older, wiser, or maybe becoming a lot more self-aware of myself. It's not about the money. So way back then, we abandoned. It's not about the money anymore. Never.
That's cool. So where do profit incentives in high volume recruitment conflict with workers' welfare?
Yeah.
And how do you resolve tensions potentially?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I suppose in different areas of recruitment, it can be very it's difficult. I think the first thing about working in recruitment is important, because recruitment businesses tend to be enablers, right? They tend to be the people who can help people into the type of work that they want to get into, the type of company they want to get into. And I think the important part of understanding that and giving full consideration to that is that the workers or the candidates, they are human beings, and they are treated with the understanding of what their needs and wants are, as well as the business. So we can't, when I talk about business and an organisation, that would be the customer or the client, the term that we'd use in recruitment. But actually making that match is really, really important. So we don't just represent the business, we have to represent the workers or the candidates as well. And sometimes that's where in our industry, it's very, very difficult. Recruitment can get a very bad reputation. Recruitment agencies and hiring managers and businesses don't respond to candidates when they apply for roles, and don't reject them or don't give them feedback or give them a really bad experience. And I suppose as recruiters in the middle, you're trying to give that balance. You're trying to be there, managing both sides of the equation, if that makes sense.
Of the equation, yeah, it does make sense.
And you have to, and also I have to be honest, it has to be profitable. It's not a bad word, right? Because we all when you work in business, if you're not making a profit,
there has to be incentive.
Yeah,
it's a capitalist society, for God's sake.
So you couldn't say it any better. We live in a capitalist society, and we all work. And if we work in a business, it's there to make a profit. If we're not making a profit, we're not doing our job. But you can do it in the right way, or try and steer yourself morally as a business and doing things in the right way.
Which part of a typical warehousing logistic workforce model, the agencies, subcontractors, which one of them gives room for exploitation the most?
Oh, I think you'll find, so talking about exploitation and how that looks in logistics or warehouse, and that's interesting. We just did a roundtable actually on this through Scotland Against Modern Slavery about spotting the signs. We did it with a charity called Hope for Justice, who specialise in raising awareness, supporting victims as well, and supporting businesses through these journeys. I think where the problem lies isn't, no business purposely will look to exploit workers, right? No business normally would ever do that, right? Unless it's a criminal activity, right? There is no business that will ever knowingly, willingly do that. Where it gets difficult in certain sectors is, or has done in the past, is where there's a desperation to have a project finished, or there's a really deep subcontractor, so contractor, subcontractor, sub, and it goes down the supply chain. So, like tier 1 contractor, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and how do you keep an eye on it? How do you manage it? So that's where, how do you manage a workforce that isn't employed or paid by you? I'm not just meaning first tier like a recruitment agency. When it goes all the way down, you have to make sure that those workers aren't being exploited. That's where the risk lies. The deeper your supply chain, the higher the risk.
The deeper the supply chain, the higher the risk.
Yeah.
So where should the CFO or COO, where should they look for, to detect abuse or potential abuse in this environment?
The CFO, the CEO, they'll sign the Modern Slavery Statement, right? The Modern Slavery Act 2015, it has to be signed, and it's uploaded and it's visible, and everybody can see it. So their name is against it, right? And so there it sits with their name on it. Now, if it was a Companies House type, if it was, some financial misappropriation, then, there's penalties, right? Huge penalties. And there should be, and there is actually modern slavery. But my point is, so they have a duty from a legislatory point of view to ensure this doesn't happen, but they have a duty as a human being to understand that it doesn't happen as well. So where should they look? They have to look at first of all, the way I look at this is you look at your own business, your own organisation first. Do you have any risk areas? Where is the risk? So if there's significant risk areas in your business, for example, you are using, you're having to use high levels of, for example, agency recruitment, right? Because an agency can be a risk, so you need to make sure that then you're checking and auditing the recruitment business that you use. Make sure that that their workers are being paid properly, paid in the right way, that they are. There's no discrepancies, and also you can talk, not the CFO naturally, but you're passing through your business, that they understand that your first line managers can speak to their workforce, be that agency or direct workforce, to make sure that they are who they say they are, first of all, and that they are being paid properly, that they are spending the money on the right things, asking questions, like, what did you spend your money on at the weekend? Did you see the football at the weekend? A social interaction. Don't treat people like that. And integrate and involve. That's a cultural thing, and that does come from the top. The second part of what I'm saying is about the supply chain. You can use your supply chain, you can question your supply chain, but you have to audit your supply chain, right? So you can explain to them, we take a zero tolerance stance in modern slavery, but we also understand it exists. That's my point right at the start. It does exist. So what steps have you taken? What steps have you taken to ensure that there's no labour exploitation in your workforce, and audit them against it, and score them against it as well, so that then you have your supply chain that's trying to perform to the same standards you're holding yourself to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Can you give me the spot design checklist you will give to a new shift manager?
Okay. So we talk about spotting the signs. So, the signs, if I'm being really, really broad about this, if you see somebody, for example, in an industrial environment, right? If you see somebody dropping off and picking up a group of workers, right? Why? So if I was driving my car and dropping off 4 or 5 workers, right? And then I was sitting in the car and driving away, why? How am I getting paid to do that, right? What's the question there? Now, it does happen, because you can, that's not, but that's just one sign. If somebody's controlling people's documentation, right? If people have their passport, they don't have access to their ID cards or their passports. If they don't, I can't access their bank details, right? Why? What's going on? If there's one person, and again, I'm talking about industrial environments because it's, big canteens, big workforces, you can spot these things. If somebody's feeding everybody else, they're going into a bag and feeding a group of people, or there's a group of people of a nationality that don't integrate with anybody, even people of their own nationality. Why? Bruises, are they coming in with cuts and bruises? Now, this is Scotland, right? People come into work with black eyes and been in fights over the weekend. Let's not deny it. But if it's regular and it's consistently happening, why? And it's not just one of these signs, because sometimes these things, that these can happen. It's in together, and it's the absence of normal. So that's that question I said earlier on about spotting the signs. We always talk about I was got a chap called Shane Tyler who's taught me a lot about this over the last 4 or 5 years. He says that the absence of normal is probably the worst thing. So why do we not talk to people to ask them how was your weekend? And if somebody's very shy and retired, even if they don't speak English as a first language, doesn't mean we can't speak to them, right? You have to have interaction with people. So, so why, how did you spend did you get your paycheck? What did you spend it on? And if some people are shying away from that, they might. But if you get to know them, if there's a reason for it, you'll start to build a bit of a case. So get to know the workforce.
I really love your approach. It's very, very human centered.
Yeah.
Like get the line manager to talk to people, understand what's really going on.
Yeah.
That's one of the easiest way for you to spot anything. So what does a good escalation look like in a live environment? Because we can talk like this theoretically. Who are you supposed to call? How is it supposed to be?
So first thing is, and the type of violence I'm talking about, if there's a number of things you can do, but the one of the worst things you could do is to approach the victim immediately, right? Or the potential victim. If you think there's something going on and you say, right, can I get... I'm going on this is about cases in the past and how things work. If I was worried about you, for example, and said that you're ticking all these boxes, there's something not right. Can I have 5 minutes at the end of your shift? And I take you away and somebody's waiting to pick you up outside and you come out 10 minutes, 20 minutes after I had... because I've been speaking to you, and your gangmaster, the person that's exploiting you, and the person that's holding your bank details, says, what are we doing? Oh, the shift manager asked me to speak. And what did they ask you? Well, they asked me if I'm a victim of slavery. You have disappeared then. See, the next day, you're gone, right? Because it's too hot. It's too dangerous. So you don't feel that somebody has to approach it immediately. It's just like building a case. The important thing is the modern slavery helpline. And I can't remember the number, but the modern slavery helpline is where you can start. But in Scotland,
Yeah, we'll put the number on the...
So the Modern Slavery Helpline, or 101, Police Scotland. They have a unit that specialises in human trafficking. It's run by a really passionate team. They understand every aspect of it, and they have ambassadors. I think there's like 10 ambassadors in every area of Scotland that are trained. So they know how to do it, and they can do welfare checks and all those other things as well in the background. But my first protocol is, if you're a shift, somebody you think the signs are, you need to speak to your line manager, speak to the people in your business, because somebody will be trained or have the understanding of this in your organisation. And if they don't, question why not.
So what common pushback do you hear inside companies? Something like, we are too small, we outsource that, and how do you dismantle this kind of situation?
That's a great point. I think there's money. What's it going to cost, right? This is where Sam's originally comes from. I felt this horrible feeling about not understanding that this problem existed. Now realizing that this problem, this huge issue exists, and accepting it. And then when I got more and more involved in it, there was many organisations out there that would say, right, we'll help you, we'll assess your supply chain, we'll train all your staff, we'll put you in the right stead. But they were wanting to charge lots and lots of money, right? And I know in a business that if it costs money, it's about risk, right? And how much it's going to cost is what's the risk associated with it. And that's not how this should be. So that's why Sam's came along. Well, the whole point of Sam's is a signposting organisation. You can get the training. You can understand what we spoke about, spotting the signs. This is all available freely or very cheaply, right? If you can get access to that as a business, or you can get other businesses to share, because you're not competing. If you're sharing best practice and how to spot the signs of slavery, right? You're not competing. You're not sharing commercial secrets. So some sectors are far more advanced in this that I'm talking about. For example, food manufacturing, like I spoke about. So many other sectors can learn a lot more from them. So that's what we do. We share best practice. We put people in touch. We help people network, and we try and get it done as cost effectively as possible.
Wow, that's pretty intense. That's nice. So let's say you are assigned a 1,000 person factory.
Yeah.
How? Give me a 90 days roadmap on how you are going to do all of these things.
Well, I would like to think any type of industrial environment like a factory would already have processes in, right? And they would already have that in. I think the first thing is raising awareness, right? So there's training, first level, right through the business. Most importantly, though, it has to start at the top. CEO, MD, private business, whatever it is, company owners, if they don't understand the scale and the dangers associated with it, with modern slavery, then there's no point. So they have to buy into it. And then it's awareness raising across the whole organisation. So then it's management, HR, first level, spotting the signs, the stuff that, you know, they should understand, how to report it. And then it's about a workforce, because people working alongside other people need to be able to spot the signs as well. So there's a whole training thing. So within the first 90 days, you would be delivering top to bottom, right through the organisation, training on the size and the scale of the issue and the depth of spotting the signs and what that looks like. That would be really, really important.
Wow, that's pretty nice. So how do you design contracts so that ethics survives quarter end pressure? You know, you need to make money every quarter.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
Well, I suppose you have to do it the right way. So compliance is really important, and regulation is really, really important. I come in the recruitment sector. I think there used to be very little barriers to entry. So at one point, I think I looked at the amount of agencies between Glasgow and Edinburgh. It was 3,600 registered recruitment agencies, going from multinationals, privately owned, to one-man operations. That's a lot of recruitment companies. So barriers to entry to set up a recruitment business are very, very low. Now, to provide temporary workforce, there's many more legislative requirements. In the past, that they could be bypassed, right? And some of those, and I mean loopholes, legal loopholes, and those type of things meant that sometimes ethics and backgrounds, ethics and morals could be left at the door in some agencies, right? And I found that really, really frustrating. And that watching that happen has meant that I am proud to work for a business that has to be at the top of the game, because it's one of the big. Brightwork is the biggest in Scotland, right? Yeah. Staffline, who own Brightwork, are the biggest in the UK. So they have to be on top of ethics and compliance all the time, and that's it. It has to be, it may slow down sometimes the response, but to make sure somebody's there legally compliant and meet all the criteria and haven't been exploited and all those things, there's such a lot goes on in the background. It's very, very intense, and that's really important.
Wow. You contributed to BBC Scotland, in talks about modern day slavery. Yeah. How are you able to do that and get people to act?
I think I'm lucky. You did mention I'm lucky. I'm lucky to have a voice and to be able to contribute to BBC Scotland, and have done for a number of years now, on different topics, not just modern slavery, and, racism, discrimination, recruitment, workplaces, the future of each, those types of things. I get to contribute, and having a voice is really, really important. And I think that's a part of it. So if people, by using a platform like BBC Scotland on the topics that are important in society, then I can, if I come from a position of passion, which I know, because I have to love it, then that's where it comes from.
So this is counter intuitive. So what story have you not told publicly before because it could endanger someone, or it can mislead the public? Is there any story? Is there any stories of modern day slavery that?
I think what I've seen, through SAMS we support survivors, right? Part of what we do is we get referred survivors of modern slavery that we support into, try and support our best into work. I think to date, probably 23, 24 survivors that we supported into good work with the members of SAMS, the businesses that are involved, because they're passionate about it. But when you meet survivors, you hear the stories, and in society, sometimes we think of people who have come, immigration, people that have come to the UK and they've come here to cheat the system and come here to take our jobs and all those things. That's not what I've heard when it comes to victims like this. There's some really brutal, sad stories that when you hear it face to face, when you get to know people who have gone through a really traumatic journey, then you realise that the problem is much bigger than we think, because it's human. And I've never told some of the stories that I've listened to, so I probably won't go into the detail of them all, but victims that haven't been...
Give us something without mentioning their names.
I had a referral, and I won't go into the detail of it, but of somebody who'd been working as a migrant worker in the Middle East. She'd worked as a maid for a Middle Eastern family, so a Saudi family. that Saudi family brought her to Edinburgh, and she was working, cleaning, helping raise the kids, those types of things that she was doing in Saudi. But when she was brought here, she didn't have the right to work here. But they were holding on to her family, were holding on to her details, her passport and all those things, which had expired. She was being held against her will, and she'd been mistreated by the family physically, verbally, consistently for a long, long time in Edinburgh. And she escaped. And I won't go into the details how she escaped, but she was helped to escape. She was working in Saudi as a migrant worker to send money home to her home nation. And that's the nature of the Middle East, isn't it? And then there's some of those nations. So, but she ended up in Edinburgh, not through her own will. She was stuck. The only way for her to stay was to go through the asylum system. In my head, that's somebody who's genuinely wanted to stay here and work. But to go through the asylum system, her work entitlement had finished, her legal work entitlement, for example, so she wasn't legally to work. So actually she had to get the funds together to go back to her home nation. She desperately wants to come back. She wants to come back to Scotland because Scotland and the people here in Scotland looked after her when she escaped. She has a real passion and love for this country and the heart that Scotland had, but she can't. And I find that really, really hard, because there's an example of a human being that was really badly mistreated. There's no repercussions to the family that did this to her, but she wants to come back and restart her life. She wants to come back and kind of get back into the swing of having to help support her family in her home nation, and she can't. So she's trapped back home. I understand, but I find that really hard, and that's a story I've never told.
Wow. Well, it's, when things like that happens in the Middle East, that's the normal thing,
Yeah.
But when they bring it here, that's when it becomes abnormal. So what would good media coverage look like on this issue?
I think it's difficult, because you can't get survivors of trafficking, exploitation to talk, because why would they want to tell their story publicly? Because a lot of the time they feel humiliated by allowing themselves to be in that situation. And what we found, and what I've started to learn, which I found so, I suppose I came with initially into this area thinking we need to help everybody. Some people just don't want helped. Their life is better as a victim of what we would class as exploitation or slavery than it would have been wherever they came from, wherever their home nations are. Or they're here.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And
tell me about that.
So then you have, like certain, and this is, certain, and I won't quote any nationalities, but certain nationalities where we've seen and understood that people come from certain nations where what they earn as a victim, what we would say is a victim of labour exploitation, and they're working in fields such as cannabis cultivation, right, is better than what they could be earning in their home nation. So what they're able to earn and send home is much better than what they could earn back home, right? So they end up becoming like a breadwinner for the family in that field of work, if you want to call it that. It's in criminality.
And sometimes the family will tell you, what are you coming back to do?
What are you going to come back to do? And 100%. So why would you come back to abject poverty when you're making money? So, and if they were to be rescued, for example,
you have to go back home.
You have to go back home, or you have to claim asylum and go through the asylum process here in the UK, right? Which is well publicised, how long it can take, and there's a feeling of anti-asylum feeling, isn't there, in the UK at the moment? So, I think when you hear that and you feel that and you think you come with, like, it feels like you come in with a Superman cape. I want to help everybody. Some people just don't want to be helped, and you have to accept that as well.
Wow. So I want us to talk a little bit about leadership, coaching, and culture.
Yeah.
What personal habits makes a leader better at spotting and preventing this kind of harms?
Of course, right. Okay. Habits of a leader is acceptance and understanding, right? Because if, as a leader, you just look at modern slavery as a tick box, we need to make sure we have training. We need to make sure that our first line management, and we have a way of reporting it within an organisation. It's just ticking a box. If you, as a leader, you see that this is a global, national, local issue that everyone as a human has a part to play in, as a consumer, as somebody walking in the street, somebody who understands spotting the signs, business has a big part to play in that. So business can't alone play in it. Government, legislation, all those types of things have a big part to play in it. But as a personal habit, as a leader, you have to be compassionate. You have to have a real awareness of it, but you have to understand this isn't just so that we meet the legislation, the minimum requirements of legislation.
How do you undo clients exec who wants the optic of ethics without the substance? You know, there are some people who just want to tick the box, but they are really not committed. How do you handle those kind of people?
I think this is something I talked about before, is that when you have values, and I always look at it when you're in an organization, they have their values on the wall, right? And they're written up on the wall. What does it actually mean to every single person? And the way that values, company values, come across to everyone can be interpreted in different ways. That's allowed. But when values are decided by the people at the top and cascaded down, that's when it becomes much more difficult, right? So you look at the values and ask questions about the values. What do the values actually mean to everyone in the organisation? So to me, that's the first place you start. Really, really, really straightforward.
So which leads me to the next question.
Yeah.
What are the most uncomfortable questions you've had to ask board and directors and business owners when it relates to modern day slavery?
Modern slavery. I think what's uncomfortable is when I speak to senior people in businesses all the time about modern slavery and about what they're doing about it, or do they understand the scale of the problem? And some of the stats that we've spoken about today, there's a lack of awareness. And I think what are you doing about it is a deep, deep question. And what you'll find is, we have a modern slavery statement, right? I'd question that. What else are you doing about it? What are you going to do about it? And the final thing I'd say about that is, whilst this is such a human issue and a human rights issue, the depth of the brand and the reputation of a business that has modern slavery unknowingly in their organisation, or knowingly, no one will ever do it knowingly, that it's very hard to recover from.
Wow.
Because the media will always look at where there's modern slavery. So, if you find it, you have to accept it and fix it and remedy it immediately, and the people that have been impacted by it. But also you have to understand that if you don't have the process and this happens, and you let this slip through, then your business reputation is gone.
It's gone. So where do you expect risk to shift? Next? Is the AI managed scheduling, gig platforms, cross-border contracting? What's the next wave?
With regards to modern slavery, I think
with regards to recruitment in general.
Recruitment in general, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I can think about where the future of recruitment goes.
Yeah.
I think I can talk about our industry, my industry, that working in the recruitment industry, is that AI is going to have an impact, has had an impact, right? Simple things like, why would you speak to a recruiter about helping with getting them to help or advising your CV when you have AI that can do that for you, right? It can make your CV suitable for every single different job that you go for. So that's great, right? When I talk about transactional recruitment, right, where recruiters recruitment people who sit and wait, put an advert out, wait for CVs to come in, very little interaction with the candidates, and send CVs to their customer or their client, and just wait to get interviews and then hope that they're going to get some success. Your days are numbered. It's over, right? The importance of, because AI can do that, systems can do that, process can do that. That's not what we do. We have to have deep personal relationships with the people that we're recruiting for and the people that we're recruiting into businesses and organisations. And the importance of understanding the needs, the personalities, and the culture. Transactional recruitment, I talked about values. Transactional recruitment means the wrong person goes into the wrong company and they don't last very long and they're deeply unhappy, right? And that has consequences for the recruiter as well as the business and the individual. That's transactional. It has to be personal. It has to be deeply personal as well. They have to understand it, but it has to be profitable as well. And where that comes from is you understand the needs of both parties. You understand how that works. And you have to challenge. So I go back into coaching now. You have to be able to challenge people's challenge, because client might want, for example, really simply put, might say, we're all going to pay a salary of this amount. A bad recruiter won't question that. If they know that salary is not competitive, a bad recruiter will just go and try and find somebody for the lower salary. A good recruiter will say, hold on a minute, I know my market. You're not going to get somebody for that. That's the level you need to recruit for is a low level below or somebody stepping up. If you want to get the quality and the calibre you're after, you need to pay another £5,000 or £10,000 or whatever it might be. Challenge. And it's really, really important. Or challenge perceptions as well. Perceptions. Sorry, I'll just finish on this, is that we live in a society where young people are categorised as being, they don't want to work hard, they don't work as hard as me, but when I started work, I would work till 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, and you could cut me down the middle and it would bleed my company's name. Well, why would anybody want to do that now, right? The world has changed, but also generationally, the generation before me said that about my generation in the workplace, and I'm sure it said that with the generation before. So accept that it's not that young people are lazy, it's that young people that are entering the workplace want different things. Right, and they want flexibility, they want more money, they want to have a career in different areas and different exposure to different things. Don't think everybody thinks like the generation before. And as a good recruiter, you have to challenge those perceptions because otherwise they end up recruiting a business that's just like them, and that's not fit for the future.
Wow. I love the way you spoke into the recruitment, the future of recruitment. So if you could change one enforcement or reporting mechanism right now or tomorrow to reduce harm, what could it be?
To reduce harm, it's complicated to report it. It's victim-centred as well, but I think I don't know. It's a difficult one for me to answer. I don't know. Sometimes I get sucked into what's going on in the now, rather than thinking about what could change in the future. I think the legislation. And there is, the UK Home Office, the Scottish Government as well. There's collaboration on this. So politically, there already is collaboration. And when Theresa May was Home Secretary, she passed that legislation, the Modern Slavery Act, but it was 10 years ago. It's now time for an update. It is in process and it's changing. There's looking at other countries' legislation. Australia have kind of led the way in the past as well. Could we just off the shelf take legislation from another country and implement that in the UK? And how easy would that be? I think there's probably people far more qualified and knowledgeable at that than I am, but I think legislation we could start, yeah.
What market's signal from customers, insurers, lenders would most accelerate ethical recruitment? What market signal would most accelerate ethical recruitment?
I think ethical recruitment is such a broad, what goes behind it is so broad. This is about diversity and inclusion. This is about recruitment practices. This is about equality and equity in society, right? And being able to accept that. And it's very difficult right now. I think for businesses, we are going through another change in society where D&I programs, particularly what's happened in America, diversity and inclusion programs have been scrapped. There's a fear of it, and actually, that's even using the term is, oh no, wait a minute, not another program. Also, how many people have been left out in society? I get really hold on to this. Not maybe a market signal is that you have to accept that the world has changed. You have to accept that Scotland, and I'm really Scotland specific, right? Glasgow. When I grew up, the BAME population, black ethnic population and Asian population in Scotland was around 4%, right? Now we're sitting in Glasgow City sitting around 22%. This is important. So the whole fabric of society in Glasgow, the biggest city in Scotland, has changed, right? But I'm going to give you a history lesson, sorry if you don't mind, right?
I love it.
You love the history lesson, right?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to start an history lesson. So that's now, 2025, and as we evolve, that's going to change. This city, Glasgow, has been built on the back of immigration consistently for 200 years, right? So when we're living in a time now with such a strong anti-immigration stance, and we're talking not just asylum, I feel it. I'm a person of colour that's grown up in the city. Racism is a thing, right? It's not disappeared. It's back, right? And it's back and it's open now, and you see it and you hear it and you feel it. It's not good. I don't like it at all. 100 years ago, the population of Glasgow, 20%, again, similar to the BAME population now, 20% were Irish born, right? This is 1925, if I get my stats right, were Irish born. So They were born in Ireland and lived in Scotland. Not counting on the other generations of Irish-born that had children, And those that were from Ireland were discriminated against. Those in Ireland that came with a different religion, they were discriminated against for work. They found it very, very hard. They lived in areas of high levels of social deprivation around where we are right now and in and around the city of Glasgow and many other cities across the UK and Scotland. And they were treated terribly. And that was an immigrant population. They talked about the hatred of Irish that's still existed in the 70s and 80s. My dad couldn't rent somewhere because the sign said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. That's in the 70s, right? It's not, that's not that long ago. That's the generation, the years. I was born in the 70s. So immigration, not just Irish, European, Jewish migration from European states, Asian migration. I'm come from a wave of Asian migration. My parents came here to work as migrants. Yes, they had jobs, but they came here to work in the NHS. So we have to accept it. We have a city that's built on migration. So I think that accepting this is part of the fabric of Scotland. And now this is where my recruitment head comes in, or my workforce. You think about the demographics of this country are changing. We are not having enough children. We are all growing older, right? We are in a position where we have a declining population, particularly in the rural areas of Scotland. Cities like Glasgow are slightly more protected, but not completely. We don't have the London effect where it continues to grow. So we have a declining population, an aging population. Really simply, if I put this, when I get old, who's going to look after me in a care home? Because there's nobody going to be able to work in that. Who's going to be working in that care home? Because there won't be enough young people to work in the care sector to look after me. That worries me, right? Not just in care, in the sectors where we already see labour shortages. How do we fill those gaps? So difficult, really, really difficult.
So for UK ops leaders watching us right now, and they are trying to reduce workplace exploitation, what will you tell them?
Again, I go back to in leadership, for the leaders out there, is stop, understand it, accept it. Everybody has a part to play. You work in finance, you can do something about it. You work in operations, you can do something about it. You're a chief exec, managing director, HR, you can do something about it. Start by educating yourself and understanding the scale of the problem. Don't dismiss it. In my opinion, it's a growing issue, and it's only going to get bigger. We'll never eradicate it. We can take steps to mitigate it. From a business leader, you can try and mitigate the risks, but that starts with education and awareness. Understanding, accepting this is a problem locally, nationally, and globally is the first step to doing that.
Education and awareness
100%
is the way to go.
Yeah.
So what does success looks like for SAMS, for Scotland against modern slavery in the next 5 years?
Success for Scotland against modern slavery in the next 5 years, to me, is really, really simple. I think we have a passion and a duty to keep continually raising awareness. Where we looked at the business community to start with, it grew into something else. We talked at schools, we've talked at various other groups and community groups. There was an asylum system. Ukrainian nationals had a project running for them when they first arrived in 2022. So all of that felt like it was being success. Where I felt the biggest success came from was when we helped those survivors into work. Difficulty is now those survivors that get referred to as don't tend to have the right to work, because post-Brexit that's become much harder. So it's much harder to support those with the right to work. So for me, we have over 65, I think, businesses that are partners. It's free. They're not charged a penny to become a corporate partner of SAMS. We just ask them to be passionate and ambassadors of what we do in their business. We could have another 100 members. We could have a team or a group running SAMS. We have different subjects. So success, again, to answer the question, we have a core of businesses within manufacturing. That's where the risk was initially. We have now looking at other areas. So public transport and the transportation of victims. We are setting up a grouping of organisations and setting up a round table in person. We have a couple of members of SAMS, Caledonian Sleeper, Northlink Ferries, Stenaline that have recently joined. They're all in the provision of transport. We need more transport providers to be involved so they share best practice, because spotting the signs of somebody who's been physically trafficked is very different from somebody who's been trafficked for exploitation and labour exploitation. So we want to tackle that. That's not in my understanding. So we will have, 5 years' time, a number of different groupings of businesses in different sectors that come together, and they're working together to keep raising awareness.
I need you to finish this. Okay. A safe workplace starts when leaders.
Safe workplace starts when leaders create a culture and environment that everybody feels safe in. This is mentally safe, physically safe. Being physically safe is really important, right? But being mentally safe, and how do you allow that to happen? Well, you have the culture. The culture has to be right in the organisation. Culture has to be challenging, because work will always be challenging, but it has to be really supportive. Those two things have to be hand in hand.
Is there anything, what message do you have for the world today?
For the world? Wow. I think if you love what you do, it never feels like work. That was my father that, it drilled that into me, and his values. And my father's, he passed away a number of years ago, but I have a lot of respect for what his values were, but unknowingly they were transferred into me. And as I've grown up and grown older and older and older, I see the impact that's had. So love what you do, because if you don't, it's a hard slog. Life is tough. You have to be passionate about it. Find out what that is. Where's your passion, and make sure you're involved in it in some shape or form. Might not make you money, but make sure you're making a difference.
If I were to give you a magic wand, and this is sort of the funny question I ask people, a magic wand and let's say £100 million, or I give you a check, a blank check.
Yeah.
How will you change the world?
Oh, wow. Well, actually, the first thing I do will be really selfish, right? First thing I'll do is I have a 1976 Volkswagen Beetle that I've had since I was 16, passed my test and started to drive it. It was actually originally my dad's car, and a long time ago. I've raised a family, and, this money gets tight. That car's been completely neglected, and it sits in my driveway rotting. I would love to pay somebody or have the money in time to just get that car back on the road. I just need to hear that engine again. It's been so long, right? And I'm now nearly 50. I'm 48. That's how long I've had that car. It's the love of my life, so I have to do that. That's not going to change the world, but it'll make me a happy person.
That's cool. Thank you so much for your time, Shaba.
Thank you very much.
Oh.